Training camp is in full swing at the Atlantic Health Jets Training Center in Florham Park, New Jersey, and we're here to update you on player progress and depth chart analysis. So fasten your seatbelts, kick back, get ready to fly with us once again on another edition of the newly named Jets FM on the Ourlads Football Radio Network, on the Prime Sports Radio Network, right now. All right, it's Thursday, August 1st, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Welcome back to another training camp edition of Jets FM on the OFN at ourlads.com. And we've got a lot to talk about here over the next probably 45 minutes or so. And Randy Lang will join us quarter past the hour. He's going to be joining us live from training camp. We'll talk to him about what's going on, what he sees is happening. Of course, Randy is going to be with us all season, current senior consultant and reporter for NewYorkJets.com. All right, now a little bit later on, when at the bottom of the hour, after Randy, we're going to go over the depth chart. I'm going to go position by position because I don't think we're going to have time for it in the first segment, but we're going to go position by position and predict, as we do every season, what we think is going to how the depth chart is going to shake out. And we'll go over that. We'll talk about the players who are probably battling for the final spots. We'll update you on injuries and potential practice squad candidates and more. But before we do that, let's go ahead. And I want to talk about something that I tweeted out earlier this week. And I always have to remind everybody about this because we have new listeners all the time. And that is regarding an article that came out. Brian Costello, NewYorkPost.com, this past week. The Jets purge that everyone hated looks brilliant now. All right, and if you've been listening to us for years, especially last offseason, you know that we got a kick out of that one. The Jets purge that everyone hated looks brilliant now. Well, thank you, Brian. I think that's another way of saying I'm brilliant. That's how I'm taking it. I'm brilliant. I'm brilliant because I didn't hate it. So that's pretty cool. Thank you, Brian. Now, part of the article, Brian says and talks about, the Revis and Mangold transactions were part of a series of moves Maccagnan made in the winter and spring of 2017 that came to be known as the Purge. The moves were unpopular with many Jet fans at the time. Not here. Not here. That's why he did say many. He didn't say all. He said many. So the ones that weren't part of the many, I know there was a good percentage of them that listened to this show and believed in what I said. And, of course, had their own beliefs. So the moves were unpopular with many Jet fans at the time who saw recognizable names and players whose jerseys they had worn getting shown the door unceremoniously. This led to talk of tanking and 0-16 and cries that the Jets could not win with such a terrible roster. And he admitted it, some of which I was guilty of, he says. And yes, I did point you out, I'm pretty sure, Brian. I pointed out Manish Mehta. I might have pointed out Brian. I pointed out Louis Riddick on ESPN. Now he goes on to say, now a year later, the moves Maccagnan made with the urging blessing of owner Woody Johnson look like the right ones. Yes, they do, Brian. Yes, they do. Here's a little excerpt from the June 8th podcast that you can check out. All our shows are on demand, so you can check them out under Jets FM. The link on over. Actually, you can check it out over on Prime Sports Network. And just keep that in mind, of course. This is an Ourlads Football Network production as well. But we have all of the shows that were at the time a Prime Sports Network production solely and partnered with Jets Confidential Radio. So let's listen into a little bit of that podcast. Hey, you know what? Maybe we didn't find our quarterback, but we found it. We found Adams and May. And we found a few more young guys. Hey, you know what, Maccagnan? Good job finding those guys. And then, hey, you know what? The locker room's nice. There's good PR with the team. There's a lot of hope in the organization. Todd Bowles seems to have respect in the locker room. Hey, you know what? Everybody's coming back. And, hey, you know what? We didn't win. We won 3 games. We're going to get one of the top 2 or 3 picks in the draft. Hey, well, maybe we'll get a franchise quarterback out of it. That's their thinking. Not team tank. Not, hey, we're just going to strip the team of all these players and we're going for one of those quarterbacks. And, like we're in the NHL or something. We're gonna get one of these franchise dynasty type players that only come around once every 20 years, and it's gonna change everything. Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, those guys are not in the draft next year. Okay, I don't care. I mean, once again, everybody, and we'll talk more about, of course, when we get into football season, about the whole Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen thing. Are these guys good quarterbacks? Sure they are. But there is no guarantee, first of all, that either of them are coming out next year. No guarantee. And even if they do, at this point today, there's no guarantee that either of those guys is one of those quarterbacks that only comes around once every 10 years. Okay? There's not. So you don't, and in the NFL, that's normal. That's why I give the example of the NHL. I can give the example of the NBA as well. Those sports, even in baseball with Bryce Harper. But in the NFL, it's very rare that at this time of year that, hey, man, you should tank because next year's draft, this guy, that type of guy, he don't come around more than every 10 or 15 years. That just does not happen. And by the way, you know how difficult it is if there is that one player to say team tank and still end up with the first pick? You know how difficult that is? How rare is it for the first pick in the draft, the team with the worst record, to be like 3 games worse than the second team? That stuff usually comes down to the last week of the season every year of who's getting the first pick. So there are absolutely no guarantees in any of those scenarios about we're going to tank and we're going to get one of these quarterbacks next year, because you know why? We haven't had one in 100 years, and that's the philosophy. That's what Woody said. Woody said, you know what? I don't want to spend my money. I want to tank, and I want to go after a quarterback next year. That is horse crap. None of that is true. The only way that it works is exactly the way that I said it. Is that if it works the way that, in this way, the way that you're still trying to win, you're trying to build the players, and if you end up with that pick and one of those quarterbacks is available and he does become your franchise guy, then you take it. But there is no tank.
All right. So that's what we talked about. And matter of fact, we talked about Sheldon Richardson being traded later on, potentially during training camp. Because, again, this was in June that we were talking. And that if we did trade Sheldon Richardson, we would potentially be looking for a wide receiver. Well, Sheldon Richardson was traded for Curse. We also talked about how much nonsense it was that the Jets were going to have the worst record in football. And we went over the reasons why there. And we also, as we went through the list of all of those superstar-type players, difference makers, overpaid players that got cut and let go, especially the David Harris move. You had Louis Riddick and Meta, who also slammed the Jets for letting David Harris go when they let him go. Oh, it's unfair to David Harris. How can you not let him go earlier on in the offseason so he could find the right destination? Where did he end up going? New England. What happened to Hightower? Injured. How did their linebackers look last year? Awful. Harris had a great opportunity, even though the Jets did not cut him until late. And he blew it because he was washed up. And we also referenced the Demario Davis trade of how it coincided with David Harris getting let go. That was not a coincidence. That, I'm sure, precipitated the deal, the move to let Harris go. We have our linebacker now. Now we don't need David Harris here. Now we can let him go. That's a business move. That is a smart business move. We don't have to screw around with the old days of Leon Hess, who was a great owner, a great man. But we don't have to screw around with those days, which, for the most part, were a lot of losing. Because we were a nice organization. We did nice things. We hired nice guys, I guess, like Rich Kotite. You know, we did nice things, like we would have kept David Harris. Oh, David's a nice guy. We're just going to let him play here until he's ready to retire, and we're going to hold up some cap space for another couple of years because we can't let him go. He's a part of our family. That's how we used to do it. We don't do that anymore, and we should be grateful because the best teams, the winning teams, do not handle their business that way. I mean, all you got to do is take a look at the model franchise, the Patriots, and how many of their star players that end up getting released, cut, traded a couple of years before they're done. So come on. Bottom line is, check that out, June 8th, last year. It's available on our website. I will tweet it out a little bit later on and remind everybody, especially all our new listeners, thanks to our relationship with Ourlads and the Ourlads Football Radio Network, and, of course, Randy with NewYorkJets.com, so you can check that out. I'm a little bit long-winded. It took an hour and no commercials, so I'd have to fast-forward through a few spots. But a lot of points were made that came true. And again, that is why we will always speak the truth here. We're not going to just look for clicks. Okay, we're not going to slam the Jets for sake of slamming or falsely praise them either. And by the way, you know what we also did? We talked up Austin Seferian-Jenkins in that broadcast. And said, here's a guy that could be a lot better for us this season than people think. You know, I was going through how certain positions on the team weren't as bad as was being led on, that there was no way was that team that was assembled a winless football team. There was absolutely no way were the New York Jets a winless football team on paper going into the regular season last year. And we specified why, going through the positions. Matter of fact, I think we even talked about the best case scenario could be 4 or 5 wins. Actually, no. I think we later on, when we went to the previews, and I don't know what broadcast that was, but we had our preview for the season show a few months later, in September. We had talked about best case scenario at that point, if everything worked out, could be 6 or 7 wins. But that was best case scenario. And as we all know, the Jets were in a lot of close games last year, so they didn't get best case scenario. They played well. Sure, maybe they outplayed what a lot of people thought they were going to play record-wise, but they could have been even a little bit better. Point is that it's just a way of recognizing our work here, and again, it's important, I think, that we do that for all our new listeners. Okay, let's now and again, coming up in about after our next segment, we are going to go through the positions. As I mentioned, we'll predict the 53-man roster and so forth. I figured I'd do that after this next segment because this way I could find. I'm questioning some of my own decisions I have to make, so I want to be able to get somebody else's input. And why not by going to the outdoor deck overlooking the practice fields at the Atlantic Health Jets Training Center in Florham Park, New Jersey, by welcoming in our analyst here, the current senior consultant and reporter for NewYorkJets.com, Randy Lang. Randy, thanks for joining us again today.
Hey, Greg, how you doing? It's a really nice day at the moment, although the storm clouds have started to come in a little bit. We just got a little bit of rain here, but it's generally a nice, a little breezy, but hot day, and it's a good day for getting players into shape, wouldn't you say?
I hope so. By the way, your connection's a little muzzled, just so you know.
Okay.
That's better. There you go. That's a lot better.
I'll try to keep this close to the mouth.
There you go. That's perfect. All right, Randy. So tell me, the action's really picked up over the last couple of days because Sam Darnold's in. And I'm not going to go through the contract. And I say this every year when I talk on all of my shows. I'm not a big guy on contracts, not because I don't understand math. I just don't really care much. The only thing I care about are salary cap space, how it fits into teams and their successes. But the bottom line is, and I think this is all that matters, is that Sam Darnold's in. He really didn't miss anything important. And now he gets an opportunity to compete for the job. So what have you seen so far this week with all three quarterbacks?
Well, it's obviously Darnold. I mean, regardless of the fact that he still is the third quarterback behind Josh McCown and Teddy Bridgewater. But he has practiced for most of the last two practices. That was when he came in on Monday. He came in a little late, but not terribly late to practice after signing here at the Atlantic Health Jets Training Center. And then yesterday he was out there for the full practice, and Darnold looks good. He did not light it up yet. He was, I think some of the reporters were saying he was a little spotty, a little up and down yesterday. That's for sure. That's to be expected.
Yeah.
But he definitely does show the skill level to play here, to succeed here, and he's got the mentality. I just love this kid. He's only 21, but I say he kind of has the brain of a 25-year-old, meaning maybe a 4 or 5 year veteran. He just seems to get it.
Yep.
And he wants to do well, and I think he will.
Well, I'm going to say, I've said this before, I'm going to continue to say this, especially we'll find out what happens for real when we see all these quarterbacks in action. But when I think about how the whole quarterback room is going to work and who's going to start opening day, and again, we talked about it, I don't think McCown's going to have to really prove much as long as we expect him to look what he's going to, he's the guy that in practice is going to look the best. He's just going to. He's the oldest. He's been here already. Even though he doesn't completely understand the system as much as he would if Morton was back. Fact is, he's been around the block. He's a very good quarterback in practice and a pretty decent quarterback in games as well. But he's going to have the leg up over those guys until we at least see some action out of Bridgewater and Darnold in the preseason games. And I just look at it as, I think here's my thinking is if Bridgewater beats out McCown, and it looks like, which I think again, if there's no injury issues and there's no rust that's going to hold him back, and he gets the system quickly, because at this stage of his career he should be better than McCown. So let's say he is. I can't see the Jets trading him to settle for a guy that is not as good as Bridgewater during this camp. And then the other way is if he's not better than McCown, then you have to look at it from the opposition point of view. Why would I want to trade and give you a second or third round pick for Teddy Bridgewater if he can't even beat out 39 Josh McCown in training camp?
Yeah, well, that's very good observations. Of course, the third option would be if we don't know who's better because they're playing very similarly.
Yes, that's
McCown
it. That would be the
Bridgewater.
one. Yes, if it was,
and that would be the one that probably the Jets would love the most because it would increase Teddy's value.
Yes,
and somewhere around the third or fourth preseason game, we could see that happen. But just the Jets have not broached that subject at all. They are content right now to go into the season. Their public stance is we're going to go in with these three, and they're going to sort themselves out. And as far as the camp for the first two guys, they've shown some flashes, obviously, of their veteran skills. Teddy Bridgewater definitely moving around well. Neither one has had like a long stretch of lights out. 12 for 12 on that drive.
Sure.
They've all thrown touchdowns. They've all thrown some picks, just like Darnold in a sense, but. I think the key thing for Jet fans, something very interesting. The writers have said it, the fans have probably said it, but I hadn't heard a player or an ex-player say it. I talked to Wayne Corbett yesterday. He was here watching practice, and He's still a student of the Jets, even though he's been out of the game for a few years. And he said, Randy, when's the last time we had 3 quarterbacks, all of whom could start 16 games in this league?
That's right.
I mean, he was very impressed with all 3. And so I think that's a great sign for the Jets. And also, they seem to have the team first. I mean, there's no rivalries, breaking out in the open, no bitterness. They're all trying to help each other out, make each other better, and whoever gets the nod from Todd Bowles and Jeremy Bates will be the winner, and they'll support it.
Yeah, and I agree with your point, great point, that if all 3 quarterbacks are all playing well during camp, and McCown and Bridgewater playing at a high level together, and Darnold looks like he's capable of starting if you need him to, then all of a sudden the talk of Bridgewater being traded makes a lot more sense. That would be the 1 out of 3. That's why I think it is like a 33% chance he gets traded. I'm going to stick to it more of a 66% chance he does not get traded. Let's talk about the wide receivers, because it's really I'm starting to get the feeling, even if we push Enunwa to the side, because I don't know what we can expect from him. Tell you this, I'm not sure I'm going to expect much from him this year. That they're still going to be awfully solid, and this is going to be one of the more underrated trios. And if you even want to throw in Hansen as a 4th in the league with Curse, Anderson, and Pryor.
Yeah, they have that feel about them. It's not obviously a big name group. You would not say, oh, there's my number 1 receiver. He's one of the best in the league. But we have a lot of players here who have a lot of experience in the pros. So far, Jermaine Kearse has looked really sharp. He's more of a possession guy, but he's looked very good, running routes and catching balls from any of the quarterbacks. And Terrell Pryor has returned to practice. He had been out all of OTAs and the early part of training camp because he's still rehabbing from that foot injury he had with the Redskins actually it was early in the season, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But he's finally back, and he's running with doing team drills and going full. And Robbie Anderson looks okay. He looks good. He looks fast as always. He's going to be a factor. And as you mentioned, Quincy is a question mark. Quincy just went out yesterday with an injury.
Yep.
Todd Bowles would not specify what the injury was, although he said it was not the neck injury that Quincy got last year around this time. But that's another roadblock for Quincy Enunwa, who was looking very good and was running around, but still was wearing the red jersey, hands off. And now he might be sidelined for a little bit, but Bowles was not going to go into any great detail about training camp injuries until he has to, which would be for the preseason games and in the regular season.
Yeah, I look at it as if a major bonus if Enunwa can give them anything of value this season. And I think he will, but I would anticipate we'll see more of that second half of the season. As long as he stays healthy, gets the rust off and all of that, that I think he'll be much more in sync with everybody later on in the season. Let's talk about the tight ends, because we figured this would be a battle. We knew Leggett and Herndon, barring injuries, they're going to be 2 of the 3 tight ends that are going to make the roster. But you think that maybe is there a possibility that Neil Sterling could end up stealing that 3rd spot?
Well, it's a possibility. I think Neil's looked good, and he came to the Jets last year early in the season, and he saw some action, but not a lot. Caught a few balls, not a lot. But he is having a very good camp. So is Herndon. So is Leggett. But Leggett also did suffer a training camp injury of some kind yesterday. Again, no prognosis on how long he'll be out. That would be a tough one for him because he was looking good as well. And all 3 of those guys were catching the ball very well. And that's something that, well, of course, ASJ last year did that, especially earlier in the season, first half of the year. But the Jets haven't had a big receiving tight end threat for a while. Maybe Johnny Mitchell. I don't know.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah. So it looks like a good position with some good skill people there. The blocking, we're not sure about. Now we know Eric Tomlinson can block, but is there room for 4 tight ends? I kind of doubt that.
Nope.
But you've got a good group of tight ends. It's similar to a lot of the other positions on this team. There's a lot of competition, and that's good.
Yep. And we take a look on the defensive side of the ball. I wanted to talk about a couple of other guys who are making some noise this week. A couple of young kids. Last year's sixth-round draft pick Derek Jones, and also this year's sixth-round draft pick Perry Nickerson. Both of these kids are making plays, and that would be really big if they could get some contribution from a couple of sixth-round young kids to go along with the veterans that are already looking like they're going to make this unit pretty solid. So that depth would be tremendous help if these kids can step up.
Yeah, the Jets haven't had a lot of luck with second-round picks lately, but the sixes seem to come through quite a bit. And it would be very interesting if Derek Jones throws his name into the ring as far as being a competitor for a roster spot and backup corner. He's looked good. He's been on the ball, and he's made some nice breakups. I think he had a pick a day or two ago. Not a lot of picks in this camp so far, but he's looked good. And Perry Nickerson came to the Jets out of Tulane this year with 4 very productive years. I think we talked about that a few weeks ago. He's also looked like he can contribute. And so, you have the front 4, which really looks impressive. I mean, Trumaine Johnson joining Morris Claiborne and the 2 second-year safeties in Jamal Adams and Marcus May, who May has also returned to practice. So all of that's coming together really nice. And then you have Buster Screen on the side as a backup and as a nickel. And so that secondary is really starting to take shape. And it will be up to the front 7 to help them out, as opposed to in previous years when it was the back 7 that had to help out the front line.
And speaking of the front line, I was going over the depth chart, and I'm saying, you know what? Even though this is a 3-4 defense, base kind of defense, I'm thinking there may be as much as 7 defensive linemen that make the roster. And that's because that's where all the talent is when you compare the defensive line to the linebackers. I mean, the 2 rookies are going to make the team. We know about Williams Anderson and even Pennell. So maybe if Xavier Cooper looks the way he did at the end of the season last season, you could have as many as 7 defensive linemen.
Yeah, it's kind of like the wide receiver group of the defense. There's a big name in Leonard Williams. And then there's a lot of guys who people were probably saying, well, we're not going to be replacing Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson anytime soon. Well, maybe this is when they replace them and replace them well. Nathan Shepard really was one of the great stories of the draft. Going from Simon Fraser in Canada, leaving school for 2 years to work in construction, and he never lost the love of the game. Went to Fort Hays State in the U.S. and Division II.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, here he is climbing up draft boards, and the Jets were very much on top of him. I know Todd Bowles said back a few months ago, this guy looks pro-ready. He's more pro-ready than a lot of people think. And Nathan has shown that, and he's shown it to Leo Williams, and he's shown it to his teammates. He's a big guy, space eater, 315, I think, maybe, and a 6'4", and also shows a burst to the quarterback. So maybe, we don't know for sure, but maybe that pass rush doesn't have to come from the linebackers as much if Leo gets back on his game and he's abetted and aided by guys like Nathan Shepard and Henry Anderson on the other end.
All right, before I let you go, I want to talk about the running back situation because the big news is really regarding McGuire and his broken foot. So, again, we don't really know exactly when he's going to be able to return, but you think that there's a more likely chance that he will not be here week 1?
I honestly don't know, although it does sound that way, but I don't have any prognosis. Todd Bowles wasn't going to go into great detail, as we said, about any injuries, but he did say, that he has a broken foot, and that's not going to heal quickly.
Nope.
So you would think a guy like Thomas Rawls, who looked like he might be the odd man out after, coming over from Seattle and having a really fine rookie season and then a couple of decent seasons after that, might not get a good shot here. But now all of a sudden Rawls steps up and is a part of the picture, along with Bilal Powell and, of course, Isaiah Crowell. So, again, another good position, not filled with a lot of big names, but a lot of depth, a lot of competition, and some very promising players who may just help the Jets turn the corner and make them something other than a 5-11 team, which they've been the last 2 years. Maybe turn that around, for goodness sake. I don't know if that's possible, but wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. All right, Randy. Thanks a lot. Great job.
It's raining heavily now, by the way.
Oh, okay. Is that what do they do when it rains? Where do they go? Indoors?
Yeah, they'll be in the field house, and they would be coming out shortly to stretch, but I don't think we're going to see them at the first start of practice, although I think 2 days ago we had the same kind of situation where it rained at the start of practice. They started in the field house, and then they came back out for the second half. So we may see that today, but right now it does not look promising. We're getting a downpour on top of the tent that I'm sitting under, thankfully.
What's the schedule now? Scrimmage coming up soon?
Yeah, the green and white scrimmage is on Saturday.
Okay.
And it will be for the first time at Rutgers. They have had the green and white in a few different places, most recently at MetLife Stadium. They've had it here at the facility, but this year they're going down to Rutgers, which has a very nice setup down there for the football team. And they're going to have the green and white down there, and it's also a Legends weekend, so we're going to have about 80 former Jets come down and take in the festivities and meet with the fans. And I think they'll be impressed, too, with what they see, and that'll be the next activity for the fans, I think, and then the preseason gets started the week after against the Falcons.
All right, so maybe we'll get an opportunity to talk to you again next week before the preseason game because I want to find out what you think about the scrimmage. It's always, an interesting way of getting started, and sometimes you see things happen there. So opportunity to play against another team, that's always good. So enjoy, stay dry, Randy, and we'll catch you on sometime next week, hopefully after the scrimmage.
Sounds good, Greg. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Randy. All right, that is Randy Lang. And again, he is going to be with us all season and preseason. You can catch Randy on Twitter at rlangjets. That's RLANGE Jets. And I forgot to ask him. I wanted to ask him if you could actually see the scrimmage live somehow. You would think nowadays. I mean, last year I tried to watch it. I can't remember exactly where they said it was, but I don't know. It was somewhere, and I don't know. I'd have to guess. Well, I'll ask Jan. Jan, what do you think? You think that the scrimmage nowadays with social media has got to be somewhere like on Facebook or something?
I mean, given the interest in the NFL and given how people are chomping at the bit for news and information, and I mean, again, I can understand both sides of the equation. Obviously, there may be certain things that they don't want to have come out yet, and therefore they're not putting on there. But I always think that knowing the NFL and their marketing, I wouldn't be shocked if down the road it ends up being viewable by all on some kind of Facebook live feed or Twitter feed or something of that ilk.
Well, they do. I don't know if it's every year, but it seems like it's every year where they'll show the Packers scrimmaging at Lambeau. So they do that, and that's because they can get like 50,000 at Lambeau for a scrimmage, those crazy, nutty fans. So anyway, I was just hopefully we'll be able to watch it. I'd like to be able to watch it, but I'll be able to find out what Randy says if I can't watch it. And of course, this would have been something that you would have been able to just see by taking a quick 5 or 10 minute drive when they were, scrimmaging in Long Island, but no more. So. All right, let's go over the depth charts now. So I want to check out and give your impression and mine as well as what we think is going to happen here for each spot. So when I started out with 58, and then I had 58. I didn't realize that 50. That's a good sign that I started out with 58 players, because I don't think I've ever started out with 58 players doing this before. Usually I start out very close to 53. But I had 58, which means that there are 5 players that I thought could make the team that just won't. So that's good depth. And so I had to shrink it, obviously, to make 53. And then, of course, keep in mind with the possibility of McGuire not starting week 1, Pup or something like that, Stewart being suspended, Miles probably not going to start at the gate either with his injury, who knows, and Robinson being suspended. So you got to keep that in mind. Who knows if he'll even be back. 3 quarterbacks. We know that's going to happen unless there's a trade. So the running back position gets interesting with the McGuire injury, but no reason to think that there's not going to be 4 unless for some reason they don't want to keep Flowers. Crowell, Powell, Rawls, and Flowers. Would you disagree with that?
No, I mean I kind of think that's the thing. Where's your view on Trenton Cannon? How are you listing him?
I have him on the practice squad.
Practice squad. Okay,
Yeah.
I think with McGuire's injury, I think there's a decent shot that he breaks camp with the team.
I agree.
If he shows something from a return game,
Yes,
which
correct.
we know is a major need.
Yes.
I could see him breaking camp with the team.
Yeah, because as we get into the wide receivers, I did not keep Whitehead or Roberts on the team. I just think there's too much depth on this team. They cannot afford somebody who only returns kicks. So because now with Stewart suspended and McGuire injured, those would have been the 2 likely guys to return kicks as far as the veterans, even though they've only been around a couple of years. So that does give Cannon a shot that if he performs well, especially in the punt return game, that maybe he does make the team there. I've only got 5 wide receivers. I mean, I can't put Roberts or Whitehead on this team for a 6th wide receiver that all they're going to do is return kicks. So it's Anderson, Kearse, Pryor, Anunwa, and Hansen. And, of course, Stewart will be on suspension. So do you disagree with any of that?
No, and I just think with suspension, there's a possibility of one of these guys breaking camp initially in case for some reason they need him. I could see also if there's such a large number of them, they could just put all of them through waivers and then hopefully grab whichever ones are left for the practice squad. But I do think Stewart's suspension opens the possibility of having a 6th wide receiver, at least until Stewart comes back.
Yeah, well, the thing is I don't really know. Besides, I don't know if Peak is even eligible for the practice squad. I don't know. Maybe he could be. But that's it. Nobody else would be eligible for the practice squad that would be of any value. And there's no way they're going to put any of the other guys, the other talented players there. So let's talk about tight end. And there's no way they're going to have 4. I actually think, if anything, the big question would be, would they go with 2? But I think it'll be 3, definitely the 2 rookies. And it's going to come down to, in my opinion, it's going to come down to Walford versus Sterling. But, for argument's sake, we could say Walford, Sterling, Tomlinson will battle for the 3rd spot.
So I'm going to disagree with you slightly here. I do think Tomlinson makes the team mainly because of his blocking ability, and like we discussed with Randy originally, my viewpoint of them going 2 tight ends at times for one being a blocking guy, especially if they're not going to go with the true fullback, and that depends what happens with Flowers. If they don't go true fullback, then I say Tomlinson is more of a lock. If they do go with a true fullback, I still think Tomlinson makes the team, and honestly, I could see one of Sterling or Walford still making team, or whoever doesn't being signed to the practice squad.
So you have what?
I have 4. I have 3 definite,
4,
including Tomlinson, and I think Sterling or Walford is on the border. But again, it all depends on the direction they go with Stewart out. So they could go, as opposed to adding that 6th wide receiver, you could go with a 4th tight end initially, but it also obviously depends on how hurt Leggett is now, because he's a little banged up, and that's got to be factored in as well.
Well, do you have Flowers making the team right now?
I do have Flowers making the team right now.
All right.
And the thing is, again, I mean, obviously we're just projecting this now. All depends on what other injuries happen. Anud was a little banged up. Leggett's a little banged up. So we don't know what that little is or how much that little is. But that's going to be a key driver in terms of kind of who makes the squad.
All right. Right now you have, what do you've got? You've got 16 players right now, I believe. Yeah, 8, 11, 16. Okay, next up, the offensive line. And on the offensive line, I've got 9. And maybe this is a little bit of hope, but I also think there's a talent situation here. We know Beecham, Carpenter, Long, Winters, and Shell make the team. I think Ijalana makes it as the top swing tackle. I think Swanson makes it as the backup center. And I don't think, unless something happens injury-wise with Garcia, he's way too talented for this offensive line to not keep him on the roster. So I think it then comes down to Braden, Dozier, Harrison, and Qualley. And I'm going to go with Braden. And again, I think maybe the kid's talented. And I've seen enough of Dozier. I don't think Harrison is the guy that you want starting for more than a week. And I think I've also seen enough of Quali to know what he is. And I think this is a good thing that guys like that might not make the team. So I'll give Braden the opportunities, the new guy. It might be a surprise, but they could also probably stick Braden on the practice squad again for another year, so you could see that. I could see Golson on the practice squad for sure. But again, I'll go with the starting 5, Ijalana, Swanson, Garcia, Braden, with Dozier, Harrison, and Quali cut. So 9 total. What do you got?
I think I'm in the same boat right now. I think I kind of have the same view. I mean, I think you said Quali and Braden is going to be one battle. If Garcia shows anything, as you mentioned, given the talent level that he has, you definitely do not want to take the chance of trying to run him through waivers to a practice squad. So I think you err on the side of caution and take the guy with the higher talent, but necessarily maybe a lower floor based upon you don't know what he can do, as opposed to the guy who maybe is more of a baseline type of player, and you try to run that guy through waivers. So I could see them, as you said, signing one of the guys who they do let go for the practice squad. I do think, though, if it is Quali will get claimed by somebody else based upon his experience.
Oh, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Or Harrison might get claimed also, but I think it's a risk you have to take.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's any way. Look, there's no way Swanson and Harrison can make the team together. You're not going to have 3 guys whose primary position is center. Now, if they believe Harrison is just a better guy that can also move into guard, and he's better than Braden, and they put Braden in the practice squad, then I can understand that too. So are you going to have then, who is going to be your 9th guy? You said it's going to be between Quali and Braden. You're going to have Harrison and Dozier off the team?
Correct.
Okay. So that's 9 total. Let's go to the defensive line. And as I mentioned with Randy, I was actually surprised that I had as many on the Jets 3-4 defense, but it's just that's where the talent is. I got 7 defensive linemen. I've got the 3 starters, Williams, McClendon, and Anderson. I've got the 2 rookies, and I also have Pennell and Cooper, with Cooper being the guy that definitely has to have a good camp in order to be that 7th guy, with Simon and Copeland out on the street.
So run through, you got Williams, McClendon, Pennell, Shepard, Fatukasi, Anderson as your 6, right? And
yeah.
then who else did you
Cooper
say
was the 7th.
Cooper's 7th. You're letting go Simon, Upshaw, and Thomas?
Yeah, Upshaw's already gone.
Yeah, Upshaw, sorry, was replaced already. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
No. Did you say Thomas or Copeland? Copeland and Simon.
So Copeland and Simon are the 2 that are gone.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. It's kind of the way I see it. I mean, obviously Williams is a given, McClendon's a given, Pennell's a given. Shepard is going to see an enormous amount of playing time at end along with Anderson, so that's a given. Fatukasi, Grant, you don't know what you got out of him, but it's definitely worth definitely worth holding on to him, obviously, based upon the upside, and then obviously the 7. So yeah, I agree with you in terms of the 7 that you're basically projecting in terms of the defensive line as well.
All right, and the other thing, but by the way, because you mentioned Thomas, if I'm and I don't know if they've done this or not, but considering they brought in Flowers, and we know Lawrence Thomas is never going to cut it in the NFL as a fullback, they should really try to put him back at defensive line, because he actually played well the first year when he came out as a rookie. He looked good. He was a very good surprise during camp, and then he got injured. Now that they've got Flowers, why wouldn't you move him back to defensive line and give him another shot there? And if you could fit him on the practice squad, I put him at practice squad, put some more weight on him, and try to get back to his old position.
It all depends, honestly, if he wants to go back to defensive line also. Right?
Well, that's true. And if that's not the case, he won't be with the Jets, because he ain't beating out Flowers. Okay, let's go to linebacker. And this is where I've got 9 players. Jenkins, Lee, Williamson, Malden, Donahue, and then Martin, Bass, Pierre Lewis, and the 9th player will be a battle between Minter and Hewitt.
So I think the one caveat we have to talk about is how long does Dylan Donahue get suspended from the NFL for, given his plea? And I think that's kind of have to get factored into when that suspension comes down. So if that suspension comes down before the season starts, which I would expect, that opens the door potentially for another linebacker or lineman to make this team, based upon the expectation of how long he's going to be out.
Sure.
So yeah, Lee's given, Williamson a given, Jenkins a given. You said Martin, I think, correct?
Yep.
Minter, Pierre Lewis, obviously, and then you had Malden on the list, or no?
Yeah, Malden and Bass.
Malden and Bass, yep. And then who was your extra?
The battle for that 9th spot will be Minter against Hewitt. So I can't keep them all. I can't keep Martin,
yeah.
Pierre Lewis, Minter, and Hewitt because they're all special. I know Martin plays linebacker, but he was forced into action last year because we didn't have anybody. He's a decent role guy, but, I mean, the Jets are not going to be effective with Martin in their base defense. So he's really a top special teams guy. So that so they have enough of those guys. No way Minter and Hewitt make the team. One of them.
I just think, like I said, the only opportunity that happens is
If Donahue,
Donahue,
yeah.
right. And if he does, then I could see both of those guys making it. But in terms of the agreement, yeah, I kind of agree with the list that you got there. So how many do we say there?
9.
9 there. Okay.
Okay. And where are we? Finally, and of course we know kicker, long snap, punter is 3, and that leaves us with DBs, and I have 10. I've got Claiborne, Johnson, Screen as the top 3 corners. Adams and May at safety, so that's 5. My other 5 are going to be Nickerson, Derek Jones, the 2 guys we talked about today with Randy that are off to really good camps. Burris, I'm going to sneak him in there, and it's all a matter of how well he plays, because if he doesn't play well this camp, he's gone. And Wilcox and Brooks. So those are my 10. I could see Brian on the practice squad. Miles, right now, I'm going to put on the pup say. I'm going to say that he's not going to be ready, and they're not going to rush him. We have no idea when he's coming back. And the 2 guys that Jeremy Clark could also be thrown on the practice squad. Middleton, I don't know. So I think it could down. Actually, I'm going to say it's going to come down to Middleton, Burris, and Roberts for that final position on the team. But I'm going to side with Burris based on draft pick status. We know how GMs are. So I'm going to say Burris makes the team as long as he looks pretty good in camp. And hopefully, I don't know if they can stick Middleton on the practice squad, but if they could, that could be a place for him. If not, then he has to play well in camp to make the team.
So if Middleton continues to play well and if he plays well in preseason games, I think he's the guy that makes the team. I don't think they take the chance of running him through waivers and hoping he lands on the practice squad. So I'm going to give him the edge right now in terms of getting one of those backup spots. And I do think that puts Burris and Roberts to a certain extent at some semblance of risk. But I do think that the Jets find a way, if Middleton plays well, to get him on this team.
All right. So what is your 10 then?
So I got Adams, May. We both had Wilcox, if I remember correctly. Obviously, Johnson, Claiborne, Screen, Nickerson, Jones.
And did you say Wilcox?
Yep, I said Wilcox.
And what about Brooks?
I'll say Brooks and I'll say Middleton.
All right.
And I do think it comes down to Brooks and Burris and Roberts fighting for a spot.
All right. So you see, I was higher than you. Like I said, I had 58, and I moved them down to 53. So you now have to eliminate 2 players. You have 55. And I would think it would have to be. That's why there's no way I could see 4 tight ends. But that's up to you. And let's see what else. I think the 4th tight end. And the extra DB, you got. I have 10. You have 11. That's our difference. That's where I have 53 and you have 55.
Okay.
But you could take it out, obviously, anywhere you want.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm just taking one more look.
And I think it's better for the Jets if guys like Roberts aren't around. He's just a journeyman. That's all he is. He can have a good game one week and a bad game the next. He's not a special player. So I think that it's just a better thing if the Jets – I think it's better for the fans if they see the younger guys make the team. And we already know with this coaching staff that they're not going to push young guys to make the team over veterans unless they're capable. So I certainly hope, the younger guys, whether it's the Middletons, the Clarks, the Burrises, the Derek Jones, hopefully they play real well and we can knock guys out like Roberts from making the team and so forth. So that's and that's the same thing why when I went with Braden over guys that we've already seen with the Jets the last few years. I think it's time for some fresh blood, and hopefully that fresh blood is quality talent. So what are you going to do?
So I'm going to get rid of one of the tight ends, and I'm going to get rid of one of the DBs.
All right. So what's your 3 tight ends going to look like?
So my 3 tight ends, I'm going to go with Leggett, Herndon, and I am going to go with Tomlinson.
All right. So Wolford and Sterling are out. And then go to your 10 DBs. So who's going to be on the outside?
So I got Johnson, Claiborne, Screen, Nickerson, Jones as 5.
It's your corners.
I have Adams, May, Wilcox, and Middleton as 4. That gives me 9. Who are the other 2 that I had listed originally?
Brooks. So Brooks against, did you have Burris, did you say? Or
I don't
Roberts?
think I did. I think I said one of the 2 was going to maybe make the team.
Roberts?
So I will list, I'll have Roberts making the team. I'll have Brooks on the out.
All right, so your 10 again then are? Starting
Johnson, Claiborne, Screen.
Nickerson.
Nickerson.
And Roberts.
Jones.
And Jones.
Roberts,
so you're going to have 6
right.
corners.
Yep.
All right. And your 4.
four
So that means
safeties.
Burris is out.
Adams,
That means Burris is out.
right.
And Clark is out. Or he's probably
Yep.
on the practice squad. Okay. So your safeties then Adams, May,
Wilcox and Middleton.
and Middleton. That means that Brooks is out for
Right.
your safeties. So
Yep.
Middleton. So you got Middleton making it, and I hope he does. He's definitely somebody I hope makes the team. I hope Jeremy Clark makes the team too if he can. But not everybody can make it. The good news is they got enough young guys battling it out. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and we certainly hope. So far, even though there've been a few injuries here and there, the Jets have been pretty clean as far as injuries. We've already seen some major impact injuries in the NFL as we do every year, and the Jets have been lucky enough to avoid that at this point. All right, Jan, I appreciate it. We'll talk again sometime in the next week or two. We'll see the scrimmage. Hopefully it'll be somewhere we can watch it, and we'll have a lot more ability to comment on it. But we'll definitely be back to talk about the preseason game in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It would be nice to actually, again, we're getting snippets of information. Obviously, all the practices right now have been closed, and even when they're open, you're not going to see much. So I think it would be good to kind of see, just to get a sense as to where the team is, and the guys who are hearing good reviews on it would be good to kind of see them in a little bit more of a game situation to try to get a better sense of it before we go into the first preseason game.
Yeah, you would think that with all these all this depth on the roster, that action, scrimmages, preseason games could be the determining factor on who makes the team and who doesn't. All right, Jan, we'll talk to you again real soon. Appreciate it.
Looking forward to it.
All right, that's Jan Levine. You can follow Jan on Twitter at AirJan23. And again, hopefully, I can see us being on next week. But I will say this, if we're on next week or not, we will be on every week all the way through till the end of the Jets season, starting in 2 weeks. So I could see us on next week for sure. We'll talk about the scrimmage, whether I can see it or Jan can see it or not. The fact is Randy's going to be there, so he'll be able to give us all the information of what he sees live and up close, and then we'll talk about it on the show next week sometime. And then after that, it's the preseason recaps. We'll have, of course, a 53-man roster show that will probably be right around the same time we do our preview for the season. And then that's it. So there's still an opportunity for a bonus show, like a preview. Maybe we have a cut show and a preview show for the season. But it'll be pretty much every week all the way through till the season is over for the New York Jets. And by the way, don't forget, too, when the regular season starts, we're going to have 2 shows a week. Randy's going to be with me during the week, middle of the week, to talk about the headlines, the stories since the previous game's action, leading up to the next game on the docket, injury updates, things like that. So that's going to be during the week, Randy and I, on Jets FM. Then Jan and I will come on the air after the Jets games every week. So we'll have a post-game show. Now, we haven't finalized yet when we're going to do it. We are thinking about doing it. I mean, it all depends on the time, obviously. So there's a good chance that we're going to wind up doing the Jet post-game shows within whatever, say a half hour after every show, something like that. Could be right after. But we just have to finalize that. But it will be same day. And the only time that I can think of that it would be a conflict if it was an early game and we did it at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. But I don't think that's going to happen. So we're going to try to get on right away as fast as possible, right after every game, give our 2 cents on what we can pick up, which is always a good thing to do because just like the players and the coaches, the fans, we are going to have our blood pressure pretty high too, pro or con, excited, positive, negative. And it's always good because I tell you what, when I know because I used to do post-game shows, and then I know I would often say to myself after I do a show like 2 days later, and then when I didn't do the post-game shows, boy, if we were doing the post-game shows, I would have came off completely different. I mean, I would have been just nuts about this and that and all over the place. But a couple of days, you tend to relax a little bit. You start thinking about the next week already. You start going, well, I guess I understand. Or even if it's something that you feel like you got screwed over by an official's call or something, you're like, okay, whatever, it's over. But that's not the case right away when the game is over. And that's what we're going to do starting week 1. And but that'll be during the regular season. 2 shows during the regular season only, right here on Jets FM. Okay, so that will wrap it up. Again, I want to let everybody know, remind everybody, we will tweet it out to check out the June 8th podcast. Trying to see if I have any. Where's this podcast here? I don't know if I have anything else on here. Let's see if I could find something else.
And then, we can talk about the roster.
There you go.
This worst roster in football nonsense.
Damn right.
Now, is Eric Decker going to be on this team much longer?
I guess hear about Eric Decker.
Their talent stunted because Eric Decker's not here.
No, we don't need to talk about Eric Decker.
And I'm going to look at it as, hey, you know what? I think we got something here.
I think we do.
Peak, Anunwa.
Yes. No, Peak's no good.
The draft picks, Stewart and Hansen.
Yeah, Hansen, yes.
Maybe we strike gold with Marks and Cannon.
No.
And you
no
know what?
gold.
We also have Vanderson
no
and
bronze.
Marshall. Who knows if they'll be on the team? Who knows if they'll be suspended? But that is a lot of talent at receiver.
And we actually got better than that, obviously.
Got a good enough offensive line. You've drafted
And, of
Leggett.
course, I skipped over
We're
a couple of the good
hearing
guys.
things about Severian Jenkins, even though he'll miss a couple of games to start the season.
Jenkins.
But it's nice to hear positive things about him because we've said it for years.
This guy's smart. I like him. Anyway, so check that out, the June 8th podcast. And I'm sorry I just blew your ears into Kingdom Come. I was setting up my music bed. Hey, if I could handle that, you can too. That's better. All right. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up. Again, I'll tweet out the link to the June 8th podcast if you don't want to go searching for it. I'll make it easier for you. And we'll be back again next week to wrap up the scrimmage here on Jets FM, on the OFN at ourlads.com. Again, you can follow Randy on Twitter at rlangjets. You can follow Jan on Twitter at airjan23. And, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at primesn. And this way you can find out when all of our shows are available on demand. You can also go to ourlads.com for the best NFL and college football depth charts in the industry, including the New York Jets, which will be updated real soon. They get updated at some point during training camp, especially as we get closer to the final rosters. And you can also check out our pages at YouTube and iTunes under Prime Sports Network. So thanks again for tuning in to Jets FM on the OFN. For Randy Lang and Jan Levine, Alpha Mike Foxtrot, I'm Greg DePalma.